We were not born critical of existing society. There was a moment in our lives, or a month or a year, when certain facts appeared before us, startled us, and then caused us to question beliefs that were strongly fixed in our consciousness, embedded there by years of family prejudices, orthodox schooling, imbibing of newspapers, radio, and television. This would seem to lead to a simple conclusion, that we all have an enormous responsibility to bring to the attention of others information that they do not have, which has the potential of causing them to rethink long-held ideas. This is a lady who is taking on the government in her municipality in Victoria. They're basically challenging the government's jurisdiction and just getting them to answer a few questions to see if they're really doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. Her name is Rena Iliades, and she comes from Victoria, and it really is a pleasure to have her on the show. And what she's going to do is tell us what she's doing in Victoria and hopefully empower other people to sort of ask the right questions in their own community and perhaps get a little bit more public awareness happening. And this isn't about stirring up trouble, folks. It's simply about asking the right questions because we're being stolen from. We really do need to take the matter in hand, and it's been wonderful actually to see the action that the people in Victoria are taking. So, Rena, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Max.
Tell us about the action that you're taking in Victoria. Why have you done this? What's caused you to do it? How did you come across the information, and what sort of action are you taking?
Well, I've been active in my community for a number of years now, and it all happened by accident. And having said that, I just listened to your last show when you said that when you surrender to the wind, you can ride to it. So the entire course of events, right from the very beginning, in hindsight, none of it was planned. All of it happened by accident, and that's the best way to go. So we're just riding that wind that you spoke of. I was invited to a local council meeting, and I'd never been to a local council meeting, so I had no idea of what the procedure was, what the protocol was, how the public actually get involved in their local council and that kind of thing. We turned up to this meeting, and one of the girls there was actually recording it, and she was told to stop recording. Now, I knew that this was a public meeting, and I knew that she had every right to be recording it, so what got everyone upset was their insistence that she not record what she was recording, these proceedings. So that started this whole course of events. And after looking into it a lot deeper, I realised that this is not just about rates, because that was their initial sort of gripe, that they were paying all these rates. And the way that it's done is just completely wrong. So, for instance, they might put an environmental overlay over a particular area, and the rates for that particular person might go, say, from $1,000 to $19,000, which is exactly what had happened to one of the residents that were there at that particular council meeting. And so they've been charged these extraordinary rates simply because they want to protect grass. If you read between the lines of all the things that are happening, it's really not about, it's about disempowering the community. It's about lording over the community. It's about taking away their sovereign rights. It's about taking away who they are. And I think one of the main things that I was focused on is that these people are not economic opportunities for vultures. And that's exactly how they're being treated.
Okay, so someone saying, look, you can't film this. You started thinking about all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So you thought, why can't we film this? And what you're saying here is that they rezone a place, so your rates suddenly go up from $1,000 a year to $19,000 a year because they've decided to draw a different boundary on a map, basically.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's basically it. And when I had a look at where all this information was coming from, or where these orders were coming from, it turns out that they're coming from places like the MAV, which is the Municipal Association of Victoria, who are very closely aligned with the UN and Agenda 21. They even say so on their website. Some other things got me thinking, because they were also talking about education and how these education ideals have come from the UN. So it kind of makes you think, well, councils are only about managing the resources of a particular area, and they're only about providing what the community needs in order to function and in order for them to be able to participate in our society, then what does our education have to do with it? If they're maintaining roads and they're providing resources and facilities like the local pools and your library and all that sort of stuff, why then are they associated with the maternal child and healthcare centre, which essentially is where you take your child for their immunisations, for them to be weighed, for them to have hearing tests and all that sort of stuff, and they get assessed on all their skills and whether or not they're developing according to how they believe they should be developing. And each child is an individual, but that's another issue.
You're finding that all of these things that are relating to children and the care that they're getting in preschools and vaccinations and all this sort of stuff and rezoning applications in your local council area are all actually coming from agendas handed down by a company that has very close relations to the United Nations. And what are they doing involved in your local council in Victoria?
Absolutely. And I'm entitled to make my own decisions about whether or not I immunise my child. I'm entitled to make my own decisions about, and the thing is with that what they do is the council childcare facilities, the ones that are run by council, they won't actually look after your child or allow them to be in any of their centres unless they're fully immunised. So there is an economic backlash to not following their protocol or essentially following their rules, which takes away my right to self-governance and my right to dictate what happens with my child myself as his parent. They're starting to tread into ground that they should have nothing to do with. So it's not really just about rates, and they do it through economic oppression. That's the main tool that they use, economic oppression.
So what we're really seeing here is like we're seeing all of these sorts of things that are normally very, very diverse aspects of human life, and these are all being put in control of local councils. And local councils are getting their agendas from these organisations that are controlled by the United Nations and all sorts of things. And so this is why we're seeing this referendum coming up in Australia. They're calling for another referendum. They had one in 1977. They had one in 1988 to try to give local councils constitutional recognition, because this will give the ability of the councils to be able to make law, basically stand as law. They keep saying, we're doing it because we need federal funding, but this is the same thing they've been trying for ages. And when you look at what you've just discovered about how all of these UN objectives are now being handed down and compartmentalised into directives controlled by local councils, if we have this referendum and local councils are granted constitutional recognition, what we're going to find is that this country can now be milked suburb by suburb, district by district, household by household of all the wealth the country contains. And that's basically what's going on here, isn't it?
Absolutely. That is essentially what is going on. That really is the bottom line. But what is even more scary about all of this is that, as I said from the beginning, it was something that was my curiosity about what was going on was really launched by the fact that they weren't allowing these people to film the proceedings of this public meeting.
So that's a hell of a download from just that knowledge. Just going, hang on, why can't we film this? Hey, there's something else going on here.
Absolutely.
That's a great download just from that event to have sparked that. So that's great, because I keep saying that the more totalitarian the system gets, the more in your face it gets, the more people see these little things and the penny just drops, and then they notice the whole thing, the whole matrix becomes apparent.
That's right. And one of the things that they were using in order to prevent this girl from filming the meeting was they were referring to something called the Local Meeting Procedures Law 2005. And it turns out that this is just a whole bunch of laws or bylaws that the Melton City Council created of their own volition. And when I looked through the Local Government Act and looked through the procedures involved in a council creating bylaws, this is essentially what it boiled down to. They discuss it in a meeting, they record it, and they print off the minutes. They've all agreed to it, and they sign it, and it becomes law. That is how simple it is. Last week we were at the Geelong City Council meeting, and the same thing happened there, and we're going to put a video out on that one soon as well. But that one was even worse, because in the Geelong Council, what happened was we said to the mayor, or I think it was the CEO, who was saying for these people to put the cameras away, that the law exists. And we said, that's fine, well, show us the law that exists that says that we can't record these public proceedings. And the response to that was, we'll show it to you later. And so our response was, well, then we'll stop filming later. So if you can't prove that these laws exist, how can you ask us to do something on your say-so? Prove to us that they exist. And in the Local Government Act, which is the act that actually governs their authority and tells them what they have to do to remain within the guides of what they are and aren't allowed to impose, it actually says that they must present on demand a signed and sealed copy of any bylaws that they create. Now, in this instance, we weren't asking them for a signed and sealed law in relation to a parking fine or a parking infringement. We were asking them to show us a bylaw for something called the meeting procedures. Now, given that this was a public meeting, you think that they would, at least of all the documents that should be available to view on demand, that they would have that one on hand, given that they were actually having a meeting. So the excuse that it was out of office hours really doesn't fly. The other thing was that, they had called the police. The police asked us to put away the camera, that we weren't allowed to film. And again, we reiterated the same thing, that they hadn't showed us the law and they required to, and it says so in the Local Government Act. And mind you, the Local Government Act is not something that the people got together and said, well, if we're going to have a council, these are the rules that they have to go by. No, this was an act that they self-imposed. They created that act. And the concern is that if they're not even abiding by the very acts that they alone imposed on themselves, what hope do we have of them acting within any other guidelines that are created?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I saw the video that you did where it was Pirates of the Suburbs, and you asked them to show these laws, and you asked for all sorts of stuff during that meeting. And the next meeting that you went to, they'd enacted a new bylaw to say that you couldn't do what you did at the last meeting, didn't they?
Pretty much.
This is like 6 or 8 people, however many people's on your council. They're just writing it down in a book and saying, do we all agree on this? Yes, we all do. And so it becomes a bylaw, which isn't actually law, but they trick you into thinking it is. And with this referendum that we're having, if we all vote yes on this, when they do that, it'll become actual law. So you'll have these little people in these little communities like Byron Shire or Ballina Shire or Beaudesert Shire or whatever shire you happen to be in, whichever district you happen to be in the country. You'll have 6 people who can just create a law that is applicable to all the people within that country, and there's no congressional oversight, there's no upper and lower house, there's nothing, there's no scrutiny of this. It's just 6 people saying, do you want to do this? Yeah, let's do it. And bang, it becomes law. So this will basically eliminate the need even for state government or federal government. They'll just be figureheads, and it'll all be done community by community. And they can create so-called legislation which is designed to milk the wealth of that particular community, whatever they can get away with in their local area. That's the danger of all this, isn't it? And everything you've done has just demonstrated right there in full view how they do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that is my biggest concern. That should be a concern of every single Australian in the country, that we'll end up with a parliament that is simply there as a facade to give us the illusion of democracy, but they won't have any real practical function. They'll be there just to say, hey, look, we've got a parliament, we've got an upper house, we've got a lower house. And what they'll do is whatever agenda they want to push or whatever thing that it is that they want to do, they'll just simply pass the buck to local council and say, hey, if you want something changed about that, that's not really an area that we govern. That's an area that you voted yes to in a referendum. So we've given that state authority now to your local government. So it's an issue you need to take up with them.
Exactly. And local government, even the term local government, it's just a term. It doesn't exist. It's just a statement. There is no such thing as local government. It's local council. And it's supposed to be a council of volunteers that are acting for the benefit of the community. But, they've tried to create this smokescreen. They're calling it local government, but it's really only government in name.
Well, that's a very good point, and I'm glad you mentioned the words local government, because in the 1988 referendum, if you read question 3, instead of calling them local council in the question, it calls them local government. So it in some way, it kind of, just by posing the referendum question, already implies that such a thing does exist. Now, in the annotated note of the Australian Commonwealth Constitution, which was written by several of the forefathers of our Constitution, every time local government is mentioned, it refers to the state. So local government is actually the state.
Exactly.
So
exactly. There is no local council that can call itself government, and every law they make is invalid.
That's right. And one of the things that is concerning is that if we call them local government, then what they become is like a mini state.
Exactly, and it also plants that meme in our minds where it's a program, you know. But the interesting thing is that by calling them local government, and if they do that in the referendum, well, how can the referendum even be valid because they're not referring to these people as their valid name? And why would we be having a referendum to give them constitutional recognition if they were already recognised as local government? You know what the real worry here is, Rena? Is that a lot of the population are actually stupid enough to go along with this.
Yeah, and
that's why they keep trying it every few years. Oh, we haven't dumbed them down. More fluoride, more GM food, more television, more video games. You know, the more disconnected we can get people from themselves and from reality, then we'll get this in, and that's the most disturbing part.
Yeah, and actually, Professor Anne Twomey from the Constitutional Law School, University of Sydney, and they had a meeting. I think it was on the 16th of January. Mind you, this was a public hearing where people could make submissions. No one knew about this, and we're quite on the ball when it comes to local council, so we're really surprised that we didn't know anything about this. So it wasn't very public, and given it was only held in Sydney, how does that allow people in other states to participate? But one of the things that she said is touching along what you just said just now. She said, and I quote, she said, one of the reasons, they're discussing recognition of local government, and they're a special committee. And she said, one of the reasons that is sometimes stated is that local government is a third level of government in Australia, and it should be recognised in the Constitution. This, I think, is a bit of a misleading argument. Technically, local government is not a third independent level of government in Australia. It is a sub-level of government of state government. So what she's saying is that it is a local council is actually an independent level of, it's actually a sub-level of state government, because local government is the state.
Exactly. Look, what it's come to, people should see their council as their representatives. I mean, okay, we've got a state government that perhaps hands us out the finances that we need to do things. If we want to have parks or we want to have garbage collection, we've got a problem with a flood or whatever, we need money, and we elect these people to act as our representatives, to petition for us. They're supposed to be members of our community. They're acting in our best interest, and they're part of the community. Yeah, what can we do? Let's make this place a vibrant place. But what they've turned it into is a group of people who just enact bylaws, and they extract revenue from you, and they milk the community of as much as they can. And that's not what council was supposed to be. What we used to have was a system where we got people in our community whom we trusted, and we put them there. Okay, we trust you guys, so you guys talk to the government and you tell them what we need so we can hopefully get that. Make a good case for us, because we want to build this into a community that makes us strong and vibrant. That's what it used to be, but it's changed. Now it has become government. It's a system that now controls you, and that is not what local council is supposed to be. If they grant the equalisation of powers to local councils and turn them into government, that just means we are governed area by area, and it will mean the end of this country. It really will. See, people have forgotten what the role of council is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a council, like a council of elders, like you had on a panel of wise men, if you will.
Exactly, yeah.
That's what it was supposed to be, and it's turned into government, and that is not what it's supposed to be, and that is not what we want, and we really do need to turn this back and make people aware of what's going on here.
Yeah.
That's why it's so great what you're doing down there as well. Like, it's really good to see someone on a local level taking their council on, because I've been telling this to people for the last 5 years, that you need to know who and what you are and stand up against these people, because they're just people. And with everything that you're doing, That's why there is no template that you can provide people for any of this sort of stuff. It really comes down to knowing who you are, doesn't it?
That's right, absolutely. And you can know all their bylaws, you can know the Australian Constitution back to front, inside out, and be able to quote verbatim every single line, every single paragraph, and know exactly what page it's on and what applies to what and what High Court cases apply to your particular situation, and be able to pull that out at any time. But none of that means anything if you don't know who you are. That's one of the things that I love about what you talk about, because that is fundamental to even knowing how these rights that have been given to, well, that they haven't been given to you, already have these rights, but how you can actually stand on your own rights.
Well, yeah, I mean, we created everything below us. That's what I've been trying to
That's
point out to
right.
people. Rights aren't something that was given to you by government. You actually employ government as trustees to act in your best interest. That's their only function.
That's
They're not
right.
there to control you. They're there to look after the stuff that is yours and make sure it all works out, because we've got these societies here. We've got these systems that we've created that are complicated enough to need management. So that's what we employ government to do, to
Yeah.
manage our infrastructure for us. But they've turned it around, and they've started to become almost like a monarchy. Because it's a corporate system, you've got CEOs and you've got employees and you've got goods and chattels. And that's what we've become, goods and chattels. We've had this corporate system superimposed over government, basically, superimposed over what we thought government was, and we've had the entire human experience reduced to commerce. So that
Yeah.
now everything we do is money. People even think, oh, time is money. Time is money. Think about that statement.
Yeah.
What is money? Money is a means of putting people in a state of scarcity. That's its only purpose. Why do you have to pay to be alive? That's what people never ask, and that's what's been so frustrating for me. So it's great to see people like you doing this, and just by posing the right questions to council, you're able to achieve some pretty remarkable results, aren't you?
Yeah, well, one of the greatest misconceptions, and I think this is really obvious early on, one of the greatest misconceptions is that these laws are created to govern us. No, these laws take the Constitution, for instance. The Constitution is essentially a contract between the people that want resources and things managed in such a way for the benefit of the people. And what they do is they say, okay, well, we're going to put people into a position where we will give them the authority to manage those resources. And so what the Constitution is it's a contract between the people that have agreed to manage the resources and the people that need the resources managed for them. They give them permission through this contract to manage them. And so what the Constitution is actually a document that limits the powers of government. It's not a document that gives power to anyone. It's not a document that allows them to create laws that tell you what your rights are. You already have inherent rights. That's under natural law. What you just said is absolutely correct. We created these laws. We can't allow what we created to control us. The creator controls what they created, not the other way around.
Exactly. But listen, you're taking some action down there, which is almost what we can see as a template that people could use just to do this with their local councils in their own local areas. And that's what's so good about what you're doing as well. And you've got an ongoing thing that's going on with councils as well, because you're standing up to them and you're saying, well, okay, show us the proof that you have jurisdiction, and you've got this ongoing initiative that you're involved in at the moment. We're here talking with Rena Iliades, and we're talking about action that can be taken against local governments. This is from an Australian perspective, but really if you look at this, you'll find that you can probably apply this to most countries, because what you'll find is that most countries are corporations, and it's all about knowing who you are that makes all the difference. So, Rena, you're taking some action against your local council.
The aim is to show others that you do actually have a say. You are empowered with certain inalienable rights, and that you can exercise these rights at any time that you choose. These rights are not given to you by these words written on a document that they call acts or laws, that there are rights that you have. No government can write a law that takes away your rights. You already have rights and you can exercise them. So I think, the filming and the questioning, which actually prompts the questioning and prompts this sort of challenge, is a demonstration to people that you can challenge these people. because the number of people, like with the Melton Council, for instance, the number of people that were at the meeting had been there so many times before, and they'd be the type of people who would feel completely frustrated by the lack of satisfactory answers to very genuine questions and genuine grievances. The simple act of filming is a clear demonstration of the fact that you have rights. And when people see that, they realise that they are actually empowered far more than they believe that they have. And then when they also see that we can't be told not to film, that is a clear demonstration to these people that are claiming all this power really have none, and that the power really does lie with you. So that's what it's all about. The aim is to empower others to stand in their own power, and doing that by leading by example, by actually doing it ourselves. And so the idea is that other people will start to do it in their local councils, and when they realise that they're empowered to stand in their rights, they will then begin to get an understanding, even if it's just through curiosity. They will then begin that journey of understanding of who they are, because that is important. Like I said earlier, it doesn't matter if you know all the laws and you're able to quote them verbatim. If you don't know who you are, all those laws are useless.
Yeah, look, and there's a real danger of not doing this as well, because like we talked about before, they're putting together a system which they can use to milk the community, like community by community, household by household. And they're just people. We employ these people. These are people that we put there. Okay, you're guys in our community that we trust. Now you talk to government so you can get us what we need to make this a vibrant community. But they've turned it around and they become our controllers who create bylaws to milk our wealth. And if we go forward with things like this change to the Constitution, this amendment to the Constitution, and this is going to give these people the ability to create law which they're going to use to milk the wealth of this country. And we've got to do it at a grassroots level. We've got to understand the power that we have of community. I always say that the word community itself means common unity. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that we're missing from our communities is common unity. We don't have that anymore. We're so disempowered and disconnected from each other because we're caught chasing paper all the time. We're caught in a position where we've got to exploit our neighbours and exploit all the people around us in order to get enough cash to pay to be alive. It's ridiculous,
Yeah.
And all of these things have been put in place by local council. So what you've done is you've gone in there and you've challenged these people. And what's the result? You've actually given them an ultimatum, haven't you? You've said, look, we don't think you've got jurisdiction. Show us that you've got jurisdiction. How did you go about it?
That's got to do with the Constitution. The Constitution is a document that limits the power of government. And it's one of the most blatant and obvious things, even if you know nothing of the Constitution, one of the most blatant and obvious things is that no one is empowered, except of course for a dictator. No one is empowered to make laws at will and then impose them on others. That just doesn't happen in a democracy, and the fact that it is should be a wake-up call to people. And I think what we're doing is we're not really going against a local council. We're rattling the cage a little bit so that these people that are people after all, when they leave the council offices, they're still men and women who have families that work with others in the community. When these people leave the council buildings, they're human beings just like you and I. They're men and women who have families. They're men and women who have jobs. They're men and women who have personal issues. And what we're trying to do is rattle their cage a little bit to get them to wake up to that and break out of this illusion that they've started to believe is real, that somehow gives them power over other people.
People are educated into this as well. I think essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to turn local councils back into local council, which is what they're supposed to be, council, like we said before, the wise elders who are going to act in your behalf, where what they're trying to do is become local government.
Yeah.
It's kind of gone to their head. It's a little bit like Animal Farm, isn't it? You ever read the book Animal Farm?
No, I haven't, but I have heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the pigs who decided that they would be best off managing the animals because the farmer wasn't doing it very well, but then the pigs ended up creating this hierarchical system, and they basically became the same government that they just gotten rid of, So, we've got to put these councils back into a position where they're representing us. They're not controlling us. They're representing us.
Yeah.
And this is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. It's supposed to act on behalf of the people. And even Julia Gillard last year, around about June or July last year, she was talking to the mining companies and she said that you mining companies need to understand that you don't own the resources of this country. We, the government, only lease you the rights to the resources, and that we hold the resources of this country in trust for a sovereign people. Really, that is the key to the whole thing. Because with that statement, what she's saying is, hey, I'm a public trustee, folks, but you have to know who you are in order to call me on it, because I'm a lawyer and I've sold my soul to this political system, this legal system, so the only people who can make change in the country are you. But we have to know who we are. And that there's so much in what she said. Whether she knows she was saying it or not, that's really what she said. And that's the key to the whole thing. And that's what you're attempting to do with this action that I can see, is you're attempting to hold local council to their position as council.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to, on a local level at least, that breach of trust. And that's another thing that people say over and over again, that they are meant to represent us. Representation, in every sense of the word, is a fraud. And I remember a conversation we had, I don't know how long ago it was, but we had a conversation about only Rena Iliades can be the best at being Rena Iliades. Only Max Igan can be the best at being Max Igan. No one can represent Rena Iliades better than I can. No one can represent Max Igan better than I am. So one of the things that I think is probably the key to the change is to let these people know in positions of authority that we've given them that they are not there to represent us. They are there to be our messengers only. They are not
exactly. They're there to be our advocates. They're there to do what we ask them to do. They're trustees, is what they are. They only have the power that we entrust to them. They don't have the power to create legislation which prevents us from being all that we can be. That's not what we employ them to do. But we have to know who we are in order to do that. Why would you see anybody as having more power than you? And a beautiful thing as well, I mean, even under their legislation, they say that you've got to be subject to the laws of your peers or a jury of your peers. You could say, well, look, hang on, can you identify me by my DNA? Yes, I can. Well, that's because I'm unique and I have no peers. Yeah. So there are no laws of my peers. Hey, something else that I heard that you've done. Wasn't there something about your water rates? I heard my sister came to visit you and she said something that you're doing about your water rates.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I've just been so busy, I haven't even had time to let people know about this. But
So yeah, listen to this, folks. I'll just butt in. Listen to this. This is something that applies to all Australians. This is something that can help you if you're paying for water rates, which everybody who owns property is. So listen to this, please. The floor is yours.
Okay, so essentially I received a water bill, and what prompted me to even ask any questions was the fact that on the bottom of the water bill, they said that they were returning a particular amount to me because something went wrong with the construction of the desalination plant, and as a result, because there was a delay in its construction, that any monies that had been taken or any monies that had been charged to help pay for the construction of this desalination plant was going to be returned. And it said something like that they were going to return $19 or something like that in this particular invoice. And then that, of course, raised the question of, geez, I wonder if it was itemised as a separate line item on my previous water bill, if that $19 was itemised. And, of course, I looked through them all and none of them had anything about a charge for the construction of the desalination plant. So that then raised the question, what else am I being charged for that is not actually itemised on the bill? What sort of other hidden charges are there on the bills? Then I noticed when I was looking at each line item that I was being charged for drinking water, and the other thing I was being charged for was the Melbourne Waterways charge. Well, there's a problem with that. The drinking water, I don't actually drink their drinking water. I have a 5-stage reverse osmosis water filter with a remineralising cartridge. So I don't actually drink the product that they deliver to my home. The second issue was that there was a charge on there that specifically said it was the Melbourne Waterways charge. Now, this is an invoice that's from City West Water. So my question then is, why am I paying a bill, or why am I paying for a line item on an invoice that is from a different company altogether that has nothing to do with City West Water. These are two separate companies. It would be like me sending out an invoice, say, for doing a document for someone and putting on a charge from some other business altogether. Now, obviously, when you have a business and you charge for your services, your rates or what you charge will take into account the cost of doing business. So there shouldn't be any separate line items charging for different businesses altogether. So really, Melbourne Water should be sending me a separate invoice because it's got nothing to do with Western Water. I wrote to City West Water about the drinking water charge, and I gave them a copy of the Queensland Health Department's health warning that was given to all the people that worked at water plants. And one of the things that really, there's two things that concerned me. The first thing was that the health department had advised that the first symptom of fluoride poisoning was a stiffness of the back. Now, me being a woman and having two children, I can tell you that, stiffness of the back is probably a very common thing. So how would I know whether or not the stiffness of the back is because I've just been working too hard in the garden, or if it's fluoride poisoning? And it also talks about that fluoride poisoning is a very slow onset. It's a process that is a very slow onset, and it affects all the organs. It limits your body's ability for the organs to function properly. So, of course, that would affect all other things like your immune system. It just affects so many things. It's just a very, very toxic and dangerous chemical. It is actually a toxin. The second thing that really made me concerned was there was a photograph of the powdered version of fluoride that they actually put into the water, and on the outside it said dangerous, poison, toxic by ingestion. They're the key words, toxic by ingestion. That means I don't care how much it's been watered down. If I ingest this thing, it is toxic at any level. Now, we know that it's toxic in 1 part per million. In 1 part per 30 million. We know it's toxic in 1 part per 60 million. I think I sent you a video on that. Now, they put 3 parts per 1 million. It is being put in at a dangerous level. It serves no benefit whatsoever. I'm not going to go on about that. Suffice to say that it's not something that I would ingest. So if they had told me we're putting arsenic in your water, but it's being diluted to the extent that it's not going to harm you, well, why would you even drink it? Why would you even contemplate drinking it? So that was the first thing that I wrote to them about in the letter, and said that I wasn't going to pay that particular aspect of the account for that reason. The second part of the letter actually addressed the Melbourne Waterways charge, and I asked them to give me a copy of an agreement or something that I've signed that bears my wet ink signature that shows that I actually agreed to pay a third party to Western Water on the same invoice. And then I said, if you can't show me that, then tell Melbourne Water to actually send me, if they believe I owe them any money, then ask them to send me a separate invoice altogether, separate to yours. The result of that was I got the standard reply, about water catchment areas, and that's the reason why Melbourne Water are charging this fee, etc., which had nothing to do with what I asked them to provide. And in terms of the fluoridated water, their response was that, oh, well, it's a government thing and, we have to do this and we've been instructed to do this and all the rest of it. So I wrote back to them, and this time I wasn't so nice about it, and I just laid it out exactly how it was and said, you've been, obviously, you didn't understand what I asked you from the letter, so it's obvious to me that you are ingesting far too much of your own product. I didn't ask you to send me information about water catchment areas for you to give me some sort of irrelevant justification as to why some third party is billing me on your invoices, and I didn't ask you to give me information about what the government has instructed you to do. I'm telling you, if you can't show me a law or something that I've signed where I have agreed to ingest a toxin, no government can do that, and especially a company, much less a company. A company can't do that. So I'm saying that I have the right to control what goes into my body, and I'm telling you that what you're putting in the water is causing me harm. So that was the second letter, and I actually attached my schedule of fees because I thought if I'm going to deal with these people, they're going to pay for my time for dealing with their rubbish. So I actually ended up getting a call from the manager, And the end result was that he said that he was going to put everything that we had discussed in writing, which he did. Now, what's interesting about the letter is that in the letter, in one paragraph, it says that you don't have to pay the Melbourne Waterways charge, but it will still appear on your invoice from here on in. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't actually remove that item from there. But if we ever come after you to collect the money for the water, the one thing we're not going to ask you for, or the one thing that we're not going to pass on to the debt collection agency, is the Melbourne Waterways charge, although it will appear as an outstanding amount on your account. So essentially what they're saying is that they're not going to remove it, they're going to leave it as a debt, but they're never going to chase me for this debt. So what they're saying is that we have no legal leg to stand on to make you pay this third party through us. We're not chase you for it or harass you about it, and nor are we going to send the debt collection agency after you for it, but it'll still appear on your account as an outstanding balance. This is the conclusion I've come to. Their billing system is completely automated, which means if they remove the charge from my account, they will have to do so for every single person in Victoria or every other person that is actually paying this charge. Secondly, they are making a tacit admission that they have no right whatsoever to make this charge, and the only reason why they are is because people are silly enough to pay it. So what they're doing is outright fraud. Thirdly, they will never be able to chase my account, including all the other bits that I did actually pay, which was the service to property and all that other stuff. They will never even be able to ask me for a single cent from here on in when they send me their invoices, simply because they can never send me a valid statement of account. Never.
That's brilliant, and it's great that you've done that. Tell the people what your occupation was before you got into all of this sort of stuff, if you would.
My husband and I are software developers, so we do things like workflow software. We built a DNA database for forensic analysis for the police to use, where they would put criminal profiles of DNA on a database, and if they found a DNA material on a crime scene, they would be able to see whether or not there was a match on their existing database of people that have been in prison for those sorts of offences.
And it was very, very sophisticated software, wasn't it? It could actually get people really, really narrow them down to their family even, couldn't it?
Yeah, or a family line or, a lineage, that kind of thing. And so some of the applications that we were looking at, perhaps expanding it to at some other point, is ancestry, because there's a lot of people who are interested in their ancestry and their history and that kind of thing. So this was a way for people to get their ancestry by DNA, but let's just say that the commercial world wanted to use in the way that we would have been happy for it to be used, and we were just not prepared to play the game. At some point there was a discussion about insurance companies using it, and we just refused to deal with any of these people because we weren't willing to play that game.
And so your company didn't last very much longer after you decided you wouldn't transfer this software into private hands, did it?
Pretty much. That's pretty much what had happened.
And that was Rena Iliades, ladies and gentlemen, a very lovely woman and very brave woman who is taking her counsel to task. And it is important now more than ever for people to remember what the role of counsel is, or what it used to be and what it is supposed to be. Councils used to be a group of people that we would employ to act as our liaison with government. They would do things that we want them to do. They would liaise with government, and they would ensure that we had the things we needed to have a vibrant community. But they've turned it around, and now they are masquerading as government, and they are usurping power in our community, and they are basically enslaving us to their will. And that's what councils are doing, and that is not the actual role of council. The way they've subliminally put the word local government in there. They've started to call themselves local government when really they're not local government at all. If they were local government, then they wouldn't be seeking a referendum to grant them constitutional recognition. So they're not local government. Your local government is actually your state government in Australia. That's as local as it gets. Council is not and has never been government, and every law or fine or anything the council has forced upon you, it has done so illegally. So every person in Australia, it's now time for you to stand up against these people. It's now time for you to question the authority of these councils. Frankly, I'd like to see every Australian question every single bill they get from council, every single rate, every bylaw that's put in place by council, every time the council seeks to exercise authority over the people. It is time for the people to question that authority. If they are claiming they have authority over you, then you ask them to show you proof of claim that they are related or affiliated with government in any way, and if they cannot, inform these people that there is a 2-year mandatory prison term for anyone pretending to be a government official. We have to take the matter in hand, folks, and we have to stand up and really rein these people in and change the direction the ship of state is sailing in. There's a video on my website. If you go to the recommended viewing section of my website, you'll see a video there called Pirates of the Suburbs, and this is the meeting that Rena had with the council a few weeks ago. And it shows the ongoing process that they've started, and I highly recommend that every Australian go and view this video and take similar action with your own local councils. But when we know more about the outcome, I will have Rena back on the show to talk about it.